Today, I thought I would take time out to make this video to discuss the matter of suffering in the world. I plan to evaluate this topic from the Christian perspective, discussing atheist doubts, raising the question to how God could allow what seems to be unjust suffering to innocent human beings. How can there be a God if there is so much suffering? But first of all, we need to define suffering. Suffering refers to the state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship. From a biblical perspective, we can observe that suffering is prevalent, and this can be seen by Jesus' crucifixion. The Bible additionally describes aspects of distress and reminds the reader that they mustn't lose hope in salvation. So let's look at some of the questions that are commonly raised by atheists and non-Christians. Many atheists use the point of suffering as a way to disprove God because of suffering. There are numerous questions that to some restrict their desire to explore Christianity, and thus struggling to come to terms with certain issues. Some of these questions related to suffering can include: if there were a God, how could he allow unjust suffering in the world? How could a loving God inflict so much pain and suffering if he had control to do so? How could a loving God, who loves us no matter what, impose natural disasters on already suffering communities, injuring and killing sometimes thousands of people? The point is, how could a good and powerful God, who loves you, stand aside, unmoved to action while such things happen? For atheists, this is simple, as they believe that because there is no God, suffering is just a natural characteristic of the world and its environment, and is something to be accepted. Hopefully we can answer some of these questions in the next couple of minutes relating to the Bible and our present lives. I would like to look back on the theater shooting in Colorado. It was the worst mass shooting in American history. 70 people were shot by a gunman, 12 of them killed while they were watching the midnight showing of a new movie. There are so many tragic stories like this, where there is so much pain and suffering, and many people are asking the question, why? Why did God allow this? This tragic event, on top of everyday pain and suffering being experienced in individual lives, may be including yours. There's illness, abuse, broken relationships, betrayal, sorrow, injuries, disappointment, heartache, crime, starvation and death, and perhaps you have been asking the question, why? Why me? And why now? That why question goes back thousands of years. It was asked in the Old Testament by Job and the writers of the Psalms. It was especially relevant during the 20th century, where we witnessed 2 world wars, the Holocaust, genocides in the Soviet Union and China, devastating famines in Africa, the killing fields of Cambodia, the emergence of AIDS, the genocide in Rwanda, and the ethnic cleansing of Kosovo. And the 21st century didn't start any better. There was 9/11, and now the Syrian slaughters, and so on and on. Why all of this if there's a loving and powerful God? Why do bad things happen to good people? The Bible does not write off pain and suffering. Jesus said it was coming, unlike some other religious leaders who wrote off pain and suffering as just being illusions. Jesus was honest. He told us the truth. He said in John 16:33, "You will have suffering in this world." He didn't say you might, he said it was going to happen. But why does he allow this? For Christians, it is up to them to put their trust in God and his overruling plans. They must believe that God is just in his thinking and trust his every move and decisions. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 12 says, "Now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror, but then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know is partial and incomplete, but then I will know everything completely, just as God knows everyone completely." So when you ask about specific individual events and want to know why this particular thing happened, we won't get the full answer in this world. Someday we'll see the clarity, but for now, things are foggy. We can't understand everything from our finite perspective. But for us, let's focus on the big, overarching issue of why God generally allows suffering in our lives, yours and mine. Think about this. You are driving up a highway in the dark when it starts raining heavily and dense fog appears. You can barely see the white strip on the middle of the road, and you're afraid that if you stop, you are more than likely to be rear-ended by the car behind you. But then a truck appears in front of you, and you can clearly see his taillights through the fog. You know he has fog lamps in front, because he is travelling at a confident and deliberate pace. In this situation, you're inclined to trust the truck driver and allow him to lead the path. And for Christians, it is the same in understanding why there is tragedy and suffering in our lives and in our world. You may not be able to make out all the peripheral details of why. They may be obscured from our view. But there are some key features in the Bible that illuminate some points of light for us. And if you follow those lights, they will lead you in the right direction, towards some conclusions that Christian beliefs can help satisfy our hearts and our souls. Now we have to remember, from a Christian point of view, God did not create evil and suffering. Now it's true that he did create potential for evil to enter the world, because that was the only way to create potential for genuine goodness and love. but it was human beings in our free will who brought that potential evil into reality. Well, thank you, and I hope I've answered some of your questions about atheism from a Christian perspective.